Right now we are at the curing facility that they have here at the lab at the Argyle International Airport, and as I mentioned before, this curing facility is ready to help with the concrete testing. Now I'm seeing two different things in here. I'm seeing something that they tell me is cylinder and also beams. I'm going to have Alejandro, who is the concrete specialist. He's a Cuban, of course, so he's going to be speaking Spanish, and we have Leon, who is going to do some interpretation for us. So we're going to ask Alejandro to explain exactly what the cylinders and the beams are used for, and just explain generally the whole testing process here. Alejandro, can you explain to us what we're looking at? The cylinders, the beams, what each is used for, and generally the whole concrete testing process.
Nosotros aquí primeramente hacemos dos trabajos fundamentales.
Well, first of all, he said that what we do here is that we control the quality of the concrete that we use in the works on site at the airport, and concrete that we receive from other concrete plants that are poured here on site. We've also done some concrete mix design using materials prepared here on site at the crusher plant in order to design a concrete mix to be used here on site as well. The basic criteria that we use to design the concrete is the flexural and compressive strength of the concrete.
Tipo viga.
Right, so here in the curing tank we have cylindrical specimens and we have beam specimens.
Las probetas cilíndricas se usan para...
The cylindrical specimen is used to measure the compressive strength test of the concrete.
Y las vigas se utilizan para medir la resistencia a la flexión de los mismos.
And the beams are used to measure the flexural strength of the concrete.
What is meant by, I understand the compression, but the flexural strength, explain that a bit for us.
Sobre un área determinada.
Right, the compressive strength test is the resistance of the concrete after receiving a certain amount of compressive tension, compressive strength, compression in a determined area.
Donde el mínimo es en el punto medio.
Right, they say that the flexural strength is that you are going to support the beam at 3 different points, and then you are going to exert a certain pressure on it to see how much it will resist.
No sobre el área.
It is not determined by area as the compressive strength is.
Generalmente ese hormigón trabaja a compresión.
Right, they say generally the type of concrete and structures that we use on site, you will have to do a compressive strength test in order to determine their resistance. Not so much flexural, but more compressive.
Y los hormigones que se utilizan en los pavimentos.
Right, you say that the only one that has to resist flexural strength is the concrete slabs that we are going to cast. For example, at the platform, we are going to have, for example, heavy equipment rolling on them. So we need to evaluate their flexural strength for that. That is why we are going to evaluate those two different properties of the concrete, because it's going to depend on the final use to which you're going to give the concrete.
Okay, if the concrete doesn't meet the desired test standard, what happens to it?
Con un hormigón que cumpla esas características.
Right, so first of all, you're going to evaluate the area that doesn't comply with the requirements, and then you're going to see the possibilities of doing some repair works. And if you can't repair it, you will break down everything and reconstruct.
We are looking at the samples in the water, right? How long does it take? The curing process takes how long before you decide, yes, we are where we want to be?
Que explican cómo evaluar el resultado.
Right, he works according to the specified standard. For each type of specimen, you have a standard that you have to follow. Is the ACI, the American Concrete Institute standard that they follow.
Se determina en el laboratorio.
Right, he say he evaluated the concrete at 3, 7, 28, and 90 days. And he used the standard to determine whether or not they comply with the specification of the standard.
A los 28 días.
Right, he said that the project design for the airport requires that they evaluate the concrete at 7 and 28 days.
Before we get here, the concrete testing has to start somewhere, and imagine that starts in the lab, correct?
Yes, that's true.
What we would like to do at this point is to take a break from here, the curing facility, and go back up into the lab so Alejandro could point out to us exactly the kind of equipment he uses and, you know, tell us a little bit more about the testing procedure that he uses to ensure that the concrete that we are using on site is of the best quality. So stay with us, and we're going to go into the lab and show you a little bit more of that. Just before we take you inside the lab itself, we're making a quick pit stop here outside the curing facility, and I'm looking behind me at some specimens, some of the beams and cylinders that would have been tested before. Let us find out from Alejandro exactly what we're looking at, what they have done to these, and why we're having all of these specimens behind here.
Del hormigón de aquí de la planta de hormigón.
Well, they say that basically here at the lab, the type of testing that we do for the concrete is destructive testing. And the broken specimens that you see behind us, those are specimens that have been tested in order to control the concrete mix design, to verify that the strength complies with the specification, and also for the control works that we've been doing on site at the airport.
Okay. So basically these have accomplished the task for which they were created, and we're now discarding those.
Yes, they have accomplished the task. The results that we obtain from them, we have compared them with the standard specification, and they have met those specifications.
All right. Thank you so much. Now we're going into the lab itself. Okay, we are now inside one section of the lab. Of course, we have the upstairs, and we will visit that in a moment. But for the time being, we're here downstairs in the lab, and this is where the specimens are actually created. Let's ask Alejandro about that. Alejandro, could you tell us exactly what takes place in this part of the lab?
Para el control de calidad.
In this section of the lab, here is where we do the concrete mix design for our concrete plant, and here's where we break the specimens, both the beams and the cylindrical specimens.
Su resistencia a la compresión.
So in the case of the cylindrical and the beam specimens that we use to control the quality of the concrete that we pour on site. Well, first of all, we take the sample on site with the relevant molds. Then we transport the molds from the site to the lab. The following day, we demold them, and the specimens that we take out are those that you see downstairs in the tank.
Los moldes que se utilizan.
Right, the molds that we use are seen behind us. We have the rectangular molds, those are for the beam specimens, and the cylindrical molds, those are for the compressive strength test specimens.
Y se usa la prensa para la rotura de las probetas.
And that is the press that we use to run the quality control test. That is we use one press to test both cylindrical and beam specimens.
Okay, so that blue and gray machinery that we're looking at there, that's what you use for the testing. Okay.
Después esos valores se registran.
We will register the results, and we will carry a statistical control of the data that we obtain from the test results.
En el caso de los resultados a 7 días, se pueden prever a partir de un análisis estadístico qué va a suceder a los 28 días, y en este caso se pueden tomar medidas tempranas sin tener la necesidad de que esperar a 28 días para resolver algún problema que se presente.
Right, you say that after 7 days, you can make certain predictions as to the strength that will be achieved at 28 days. So as soon as 7 days, we could use statistical analysis in order to determine if the concrete is going to meet the specification laid out in the standard or not. But you say in the case of the concrete mix design for the concrete plant, it's a completely different process. Okay. What we just described is the quality control of the works that we do on site.
Now I am looking over here where you have some compartments. I'm seeing different grades of aggregate. I'm seeing, I presume that is sand, or is that dust, or what is that?
That is washed sand.
That is washed sand, okay. Now, so we have seen all of this here, and we also see some solutions up there. What are those, and what are they used for?
Para mejorar las prestaciones de los hormigones.
You say those are chemical additives that we use in order to modify the quality of the concrete. Behind you, there are also some other different types of additives that we use in the concrete mix design in order to increase strength and so forth. They will give you a different quality to the concrete.
Unos 9 aditivos.
Right, they use about 9 different types of admixtures.
Okay, so it's a very complicated process that is used to ensure that you have the best quality concrete possible, huh?
Que sí es un proceso muy complicado que hay aquí para asegurar la calidad del hormigón.
Sí, es un proceso bastante sistemático, sobre todo más que complicado, sistemático.
It is a more systematic process. Not so complicated, but it's systematic.
Well, what we're going to do here is that we're going to end here for today with the laboratory. We have focused today mainly on the concrete testing and the entire procedure, how that comes about. And you would have gathered from Alejandro that if the concrete test is not 100%, doesn't meet their standard 100%, they would either do repair work or they would take down whatever they've put up completely and do it again to ensure that only the best quality work is done here at the airport project site. Next week we will come back to the lab and we will show you what they do as far as the asphalt, the aggregate and the soil testings are concerned. So until next week, keep glued to API. We'll see you then.